Have you ever wondered what Roman soldiers were really asterisk-like? We see them in movies, clad in shining armor, the epitome of discipline and strength. But what if I told you that beneath that polished exterior lay a world of dark habits and shocking practices that history often prefers to forget? What if the very things that made them legendary warriors also led them down a path of brutality and vice that would make most of us shudder? Stay with me, because today we're peeling back the layers of myth to reveal the gritty, uncomfortable, and downright shocking truths about the daily lives of Roman soldiers. What you're about to hear will change the way you see the Roman Empire forever. Let's start with something they carried besides their swords and shields: superstition. Roman soldiers were deeply superstitious. Before a battle, it wasn't just about strategy and formations. They would meticulously observe the flight of birds, the behavior of sacred chickens, or even the entrails of sacrificed animals. A bad omen, like a bird flying in the wrong direction, could completely demoralize a legion. Imagine the pressure, knowing your life could depend on whether a chicken decides to eat its grain or not. They also wore amulets, called bullas, often containing phallic symbols. Believing they would ward off evil spirits and bring good fortune in battle, this wasn't just a casual belief. It was an integral part of their mental preparation for the horrors of war. Let's talk about their downtime. When not on the march or in battle, soldiers had a lot of time on their hands, and that often led to trouble. Gambling was rampant in the camps. They would bet on anything and everything, using dice made of bone or ivory. It was officially forbidden by Roman law, but that rule was almost universally ignored within the barracks. Many soldiers would gamble away their entire salary, falling into massive debt with their own comrades or with the unofficial loan sharks who followed the legions. This created a tense and often violent environment where a simple dice game could easily escalate into a full-blown brawl. The debts incurred could follow a soldier for his entire service, creating a desperate underclass within the army itself. And where there's gambling, there's usually drinking. The Roman army provided a daily ration of wine, not just for morale, but because it was often safer to drink than the local water. However, this regular access to alcohol frequently led to extreme drunkenness. Soldiers would drink a cheap, sour wine called Posca, but they'd consume it in huge quantities. This wasn't just a social pastime. It was a way to numb the constant fear, the boredom, and the trauma of their daily existence. Brawls, insubordination, and neglect of duty were common consequences. Officers had to walk a fine line between maintaining discipline and allowing their men an outlet for their stress. This culture of heavy drinking was a double-edged sword. It boosted morale in the short term, but created long-term problems with health and discipline. One of the darkest and least discussed aspects of a soldier's life was the violence that didn't happen on the battlefield. The Roman army was a brutal institution, not just to its enemies, but to its own men. Discipline was maintained through sheer terror. A soldier who fell asleep on watch could be beaten to death by his own unit in a ritual known as fustuarium. For larger acts of cowardice or mutiny, an entire unit could be subjected to decimation. This meant 1 in every 10 soldiers, chosen by lot, would be executed by their own comrades. Can you imagine the psychological impact of being forced to kill one of your friends, a man you fought alongside, simply because he drew the short straw? This system created an atmosphere of constant fear, ensuring that the terror of their own commanders was greater than the terror of the enemy. Let's also look at what happened when the legions conquered a new city. The official story is one of bringing Roman civilization in order. The reality was often a frenzy of looting and violence. For the first few hours or even days after a city fell, soldiers were often given free rein to plunder. This was seen as part of their payment. They would storm through homes, taking anything of value: gold, silver, art, and even personal items. But it went far beyond simple theft. This period of sanctioned chaos often included horrific acts of violence against the civilian population. Men were killed, property was destroyed wantonly, and the women of the conquered city faced the most terrible fates. It was a terrifying reward system that incentivized brutality. For the soldiers, this was their chance to get rich, to release pent-up aggression, and to claim the spoils of war they felt they were owed. For the conquered, it was an unimaginable nightmare. Another disturbing habit was their involvement in the local economies in ways that were essentially extortion. Soldiers stationed in a province for long periods would often act like a local mafia. They would offer protection to merchants and farmers in exchange for money or goods. Refusing this offer was not an option, as the consequences could range from having your property destroyed to outright violence. They were the law in these remote territories, and they exploited that power to its fullest. This created deep resentment among the local populations and was a constant source of tension and potential uprisings. The very soldiers sent to keep the peace were often the ones causing the most disruption and misery for ordinary people. And what about their personal lives? It's a common misconception that Roman soldiers were forbidden to marry. While it was officially discouraged for much of the empire's history, the reality was very different. Soldiers formed unofficial families with local women wherever they were stationed. These relationships were not legally recognized, meaning the women and children had no rights or inheritance claims. A soldier could be reassigned to a different province at a moment's notice, and he would often leave his unofficial family behind without a second thought. For the women, it was a precarious existence, entirely dependent on the goodwill of a man who could disappear tomorrow. For the children, they grew up as camp kids, belonging neither to the Roman world of their father nor the local world of their mother. Finally, let's consider the psychological toll. Post-traumatic stress is not a modern invention. Roman soldiers witnessed and participated in unimaginable brutality. They saw friends die in horrific ways. They killed countless people, and they lived in a state of constant hypervigilance. There was no concept of mental health care. Soldiers were expected to be tough and emotionless. Their only coping mechanisms were the dark habits we've just discussed: drinking, gambling, and violence. Many veterans, after their 25 years of service, were broken men. They were given a plot of land and a pension, but many struggled to reintegrate into civilian society. They were haunted by what they had done and seen, and they often brought the violence of the frontier back home with them. So the next time you see a depiction of a stoic Roman soldier, remember the reality behind the armor. Remember the superstitions that guided them, the gambling debts that plagued them, the cheap wine that numbed them, and the brutal discipline that terrified them. They were not marble statues. They were complex, flawed human beings, forged in a crucible of violence and fear. Their dark habits were not just personal failings. They were the direct result of the brutal system they served. The glory of Rome was built on the backs of these men, and it came at a terrible hidden cost. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the shadows of the Roman Legion. If you found this fascinating, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden corners of history. Let me know in the comments what other historical myths you'd like me to bust.